so many of us as doctors do have these perfectionistic traits that we're just like fish in water with. We don't see it.
And right now, I don't have 10 out of 10 to give. I have 6, 7 out of 10 at best.
We got to recognize that 10 out of 10 is theoretical. There's this great quote: on the days that you only had 40% and you gave 40%, you gave 100%. That's 100% of what you had to give. That's essentially a 10 out of 10 for that day, for that situation. We can't keep living in these perfectionistic fantasies.
I think it's an awareness of how much energy it takes to not be how you are.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Beck.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Welcome back to the poddy, and today we have an incredible episode for you. Today we're going to be talking about, are you really a good person? I feel like as doctors, we tend to think, oh, I'm a doctor, it means I'm a good person, and I don't think those two things necessarily go together. I think there's a few more things, more criteria that you have to fulfill in order to be a good person, right? And everyone's definition of what makes them a good person will be completely unique. But this is top of mind for me because recently I was in clinic and it was just before Christmas, and I was thanking the admin staff for all the stuff they do, all the 90 million emails that they've ever helped me with, all the things they do. I work with them every single week, and I had given them like a little Christmas gift. And I had gone into my room and then come back out, and they were sort of talking about me, and they went, oh, we're just talking about how nice you are. And my instant thought was, God, I'm not nice. Why do they think I'm nice? And it was disturbing that I had that inner thought, because I guess it meant that I didn't really believe that I was a nice person. And I mean, just to give context, like if me in real life, especially a few years ago, I would say that I was extremely sparkly. Like I would make it my mission in life to, like if you were having a bad day, really make it my mission to cheer you up, really pour myself into people, pour myself into everyone around me. Like that would be, I mean, not every day, no one's perfect, but that would be a way that I used to show up. And I guess having that reflected to me, I was thinking about how recently I don't really think I've been showing up that way. Certainly not at work, in my clinical role. I think in other places, like when I'm doing my creative work and in my business and with my ducklings and all that, I think it's a lot easier to do it there. But in my clinical work, I think I've been finding that a lot heavier recently. And I just haven't been giving people my energy as much as I used to. And I think that's making me sort of aware of this change in myself. And I guess it made me worried that I was no longer a nice person. And that really bothers me. And then at the same time, I'm not even sure what a good person or a nice person really means to me anymore, because I think I've come through a journey, especially being in your program, Beck, with Dear Darling and everything. The ethos of that is to value yourself and to be able to create beautiful, healthy boundaries, to say no, to get rid of the shoulds. So just all of that work that's been happening in there is all a good thing. And I don't necessarily want to be the previous version of myself who was giving to their own expense, who was nice beyond reason and just giving more than I had to give. It's a really interesting concept, and I guess I just wanted to bring it here in case anyone else is having a similar experience. As you go through life, events happen, things happen that harden us, whether there's grief, bereavements, breakups, things that happen in the clinical setting. There's this cumulative burden, I guess, of things that have happened to you that you've moved through, that you've grown through. And I know that in my own life, I've been having some ongoing chronic living grief, which I'm sure many people can relate to. That may or may not be the reason for it, but I'm finding that I can't show up in the way that I would previously have deemed as my best self and nice. So I just wanted to bring it because I thought it was really interesting, and also you're a thought wizard, and I wondered if you could help shed some light on what's going on for everyone listening.
This is a classic challenge for beautiful people, isn't it? So Christine's literally like walked in accidentally on this situation where people were secretly talking about how she was so nice. And she's here doubting as to whether she's really a nice or good person, or even saying in direct conflict, no, I'm not. Too nice to even argue with them right in that moment. But I'm just thinking about how this is such a classic nice person, good person, or even in a more generalized way, expert person behavior. When you really understand what is possible and what is available in terms of this character trait, in terms of how you can show up, or in terms of professionally what's possible in an expert field, this can be the thing that makes you feel so inadequate because you're so aware of what's possible. You're so aware of what a 10 out of 10 good person looks like. And not only that, but you've been able to execute on it on some days. On some days, all the stars have aligned and you've been able to be that best version of yourself. And this is where the perfectionism comes in to steal our sense of really due pride here for ourselves. And even very simply, this sense that actually we are a good person, we're not a bad person. It's such a tragedy to hear that someone like you would question that you're a good person or you're a nice person in this situation, let alone when people are literally expressing gratitude towards you for that. It's such a tragedy, isn't it? And it's just what our human minds do. And this is why I'm so passionate about this work. I don't want good people to be able to walk around the world doubting their goodness. It's such a waste of our energy. You think about as well the way that you show up when you are down on yourself like that and doubting yourself in terms of important values versus the way that you show up when you're recognizing your humanity. So it makes me feel sad to hear the story, but I'm so glad you brought the story up because I think that so many people will be able to relate to this. So the concept of when you're really skilled or in tune with something, what 10 out of 10 looks like. And you're very aware of when you're not doing it. Also, when that's important to you, it feels very important to execute it in a 10 out of 10 way. We can be very quick to judge ourselves and criticize ourselves for not executing on it 10 out of 10 because it feels so important to you, what difference it makes in the world. And then I want everyone to start to recognize, I know a lot of us don't actually identify as perfectionists who are perfectionists, but in this story, I'm just going to believe the people that work with her and see her every week when they say, oh, she's such a nice person. Like, I'm not even going to project my knowings of Christine. I'm just going to believe those people, the group of people. And in the face of that evidence, Christine's mind can still say, oh, but I didn't do it 10 out of 10, and therefore I don't meet the criteria for that. That is perfectionistic thinking. And we do this so many places in our lives. Both Christine and I had grief last year, and it was such a interesting experience to sort of be intellectually aware that like we're going to feel a lot of negative emotions during this time. That's a normal expected thing. And then I also still had that part of my mind come in and be like, you shouldn't be being so negative. Like it's been this much time, or you could theoretically show up a 10 out of 10 if you just wanted to like switch it on and get it done. But recognizing that we don't get to be 100%, we don't get to be a 10 out of 10, we don't have the resources to be 10 out of 10 every day in our lives. And if we're going to judge ourselves every time we're not 10 out of 10, all we're doing is giving ourselves a sentence for judging ourselves for the rest of our lives. And remember, judging ourselves doesn't make us better. Judging ourselves doesn't make us more good or more of whatever value we want to have, we want to live into. It makes us less of that. It just gives us more judgment and criticism. It takes us further away from ourselves. So there are just so many useful concepts in here. Thank you so much, Christine. But can I just hand it back to you and hear about when I talk about that being perfectionistic, does that resonate with you? Because I know that in the moment and when you're in the experience, your brain can sort of bite back and be like, it's the least I could do. Like we can kind of want to argue for that theoretical 10 out of 10 every day and not think that that's over the top.
Yeah, this is resonating so much. And I would have never thought that we'd get here to you telling me that was perfectionistic thinking. But when you outline it, yeah, I've basically created the definition of me being good and me showing up in the way I want to show up in the world and being being a good colleague to these people as my 10 out of 10 self, which, like you say, I know exists. I've seen her before. She's my favorite. And right now, I don't have 10 out of 10 to give. I have only got limited, maybe it's 6, 7 out of 10 at best. And I'm thinking, right, well, with this, I need to put this into the patients. The patients are coming to see me today. I don't got time or energy. I need to use all of these deposits that I turned up to work with into the patients. And so it's like a competing value set. So it's not that I'm not thinking nice thoughts about these people at work or wanting to be a better colleague and pour more time and energy into them in their working day. It's just that I've only come to work with a set amount of, I guess, energy, and I've decided that I need to give it to myself a wee bit and to the patients, and it's like almost like a kind of a survival mode. So it does actually make a lot of sense. Just because I'm not getting 10 out of 10 doesn't mean anything's going wrong. That resonates so much.
Yeah, we got to recognize that 10 out of 10 is theoretical. There's this great quote, I think it's by Adam Grant, and it says, on the days that you only had 40% and you gave 40%, you gave 100%. On the days that you had 6 out of 10 and you gave 6 out of 10, that's 100% of what you had to give. That's essentially a 10 out of 10 for that day, for that situation. We can't keep living in these perfectionistic fantasies. If it helped, I would totally encourage it. If you could judge yourself and criticize yourself into getting that 4 out of 10 back into your day, sure, let's do it. Let's use the willpower and the da-da-da to make it happen. But it doesn't work. I guarantee you, even if you can use your willpower to push yourself up to a 7 out of 10 in that situation, so you got one more point to give on that day, you have abandoned yourself in that process of using greedy willpower, right? Your body was in a certain place, your mind was in a certain place for a reason, right? Maybe it was grief, like with Christine. Maybe it is something else personal in your life. Maybe it is not sleeping enough or not being nourished enough that day. Maybe it was a difficult conversation you just had. There are so many different normal human reasons that will always be in our lives that we could be a 6 out of 10. And that we might want to be in a different emotional state and have those emotions to process. And when we abandon that emotional state that we need to validate for ourselves, we teach ourselves that we don't take care of ourselves. We teach ourselves that we don't have our own back. And that extra point that you got, that 6 to 7 out of 10, it's going to cost you in the future. It's not free money. There's no free money in this situation. And the same with even just thinking about using all of your energy to be a bit more sparkly, a bit more whatever you think you need to be. That energy is potentially, not always, but that energy is potentially just going to buy and be bought from the day ahead of you too. So I feel like so much of the conversation that we have on this podcast is about getting a bit closer to our humanity. And so many of us as doctors do have these perfectionistic traits that we're just like fish in water with. We don't see it. We think that we should be a light for everybody we come across each day in clinic. And we actually have this expectation that on Tuesday when I go to clinic, that's the way that I'm going to show up, and I have to show up that way every week. And we don't give ourselves any grace for the fact that we're humans living our lives and that other things are happening and they affect energy. So if anything, I really hope that looking at Christine's situation, you can see how unfair and how unreasonable it is for our perfectionistic minds to judge us as a generalization, not being a good person or not being a nice person because we gave a 6 out of 10 when we had a 6 out of 10, or even when you give a 4 out of 10 when you've got a 6 out of 10, because maybe you're saving that other 2 out of 10 for something else that you want to contribute to that in that day. And for you, that sounds like that was your patience as well.
Yeah, and that's actually a really other interesting point you make, is that something I've learned is like authenticity is easier than trying to show up fake and put on a show. And whilst I know that I am completely capable of putting on a show, I feel like that's what my 20s were all about, being happy on the surface, even if underneath I wanted to be sad that day or whatever, like just making sure I was sunshine at any cost. That's pretty exhausting. And so even though that is like my natural state of being would be fairly chirpy, I think, in an authentic way. Like on days that I just don't have that to give, I'm less inclined these days to force it because of what you say. I think it's an awareness of how much energy it takes to not be how you are. Like that day, it's exhausting. And I think that's such a good point. And then the other point about saving your energy for other things, like I think we can all relate to that feeling of giving what we can at work. And maybe if you do give 100% at work, you're going home and you've got the worst word in your belly for your partner. You've got nothing left to give your partner, your children, your family members, whoever it is that's important to you at home. And I think there is something to be said for keeping some in reserve consciously as well. So it's actually quite interesting when you drill down into giving that energy level like a rating out of 10. I feel like that's going to be my new way to live my days now that you've done this to me. And like 10 is like a good for me bonus, but like otherwise just accepting, working with where I am, not judging it, and just completely embracing it and being more intentional and deliberate about that energy and just not letting it mean anything. That was so helpful. I hope that everyone listening, you know, I was talking about showing up and not being like the nicest, most sunshiny person on planet Earth was my standard. But like you said, there's a whole heap of situations you could apply this to in the way that you're grading yourself of being good enough, being adequate at something, XYZ, and where you could give yourself a break in any one day, because your 80% is probably some other people's 100%. Like it's okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to use very close to my heart, makes me very uncomfortable. It brings up a bit of insecurity example for being perfectionistic and having unrealistic standards for what's possible. I think about how there's always more I can do in terms of charity. Any day I could criticize myself for not being generous enough and for having things when I could have less, when it could mean a significant change in other people's suffering. We make whatever values-based decision that we make in life. And to be honest, it's very hard to defend any of our positions in the first world for any of us when we recognize that human suffering is so important. And then with this, when I use such broad strokes, I should be 10 out of 10, right? For every cause, I will always be down on myself. I'll always be not enough. And we have to ask, what is the effect of thinking in that perfectionistic way on then how we show up in this moment and in the next day? Does it make us more productive and impactful? Does it actually improve our contribution? Or does it just make us feel less and less able to contribute, less and less empowered to contribute, less and less strategic at contributing, not only in the immediate moment, but then in the longer term future as well? You'll never be good enough and you'll never do enough when it comes to these things. So what we need is a different way to define enough. That is not, I'm a 10 out of 10 for every charity and every cause at any one time. That can't be it. We can't make our definition of being a good person that I am always constantly thinking about how everybody else feels and making sure everybody else is only better off energetically for being in the space as me. We can't make that our definition of good enough. So this is just an invitation for you to notice. I know it sounds extreme, but if you look in your mind, you will be doing this in different places of your life. Somebody will call you a nice person, a good person, like they did with Christine, and listen for when your mind just rejects it. And it's like, no, I'm not, because I didn't say hello to that stranger on the street that acknowledged me today, or I didn't take my elderly neighbor's rubbish bin in. I'm not, I took the easy route instead of doing that. You know, just listen to your mind, watch the effect of those thoughts in terms of, for you, what it really means to be a good person. All right, guys, our beautiful friends, our Dr. Humans, thank you for tuning in with us. We hope you're a bit more kind, a little bit less perfectionistic with yourselves for listening to this episode. And we'll see you in our next one. Bye. I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds.